Today at Mystoriah, we will discuss 3 encounters that happen deep in the wilderness, far from marked trails and the safety of crowds. These are stories about bridges that shouldn't be crossed, clearings that exist outside of time, and the moment you realize you're not alone in the woods. Stories about what happens when you venture too far into places where the forest has its own rules. I've been hiking solo for 6 years now. I know the silence of trees better than the noise of cities. I don't need marked trails anymore. Maybe that's what brought me here. It was October. Northern forests are different in autumn. The air is cold but not frozen. The sky gray but not raining. I came for solitude, for that feeling of being the last person left. 4 hours in, the terrain got steeper. Then I saw the gorge. It wasn't massive, 30 feet down, maybe 40. Rocky bottom with a creek running through it. Not guaranteed death if you fell, but you'd break something. The walls looked impossible to climb, loose shale and overhang everywhere. There was a fallen oak wedged between both sides, thick trunk, the bark worn smooth from weather and probably other hikers using it as a bridge. I studied it for several minutes, tested the stability with my foot. It seemed solid. I took my time crossing, kept my focus on each step. The adrenaline hit when I reached the other side, that good kind of rush you get from balancing over nothing. Then I heard the sound, rhythmic thunking, behind me. I turned around. There was a man on the other side of the gorge, 10 feet from where the tree met the bank. Older, maybe 50s, wearing a ratty camo jacket and old jeans, scraggly beard. Looked like every outdoorsman stereotype you could imagine. He was holding an axe, full size. I was still processing that when he walked right up to the base of the tree and started swinging. I shouted across at him, asked what he was doing. He didn't look up, just kept swinging. One of his swings landed deeper than the others. The tree shifted slightly. I yelled louder, told him I'd just crossed on that thing. He knew. Of course he knew. He didn't stop swinging. I started shouting insults, things that didn't even make sense. Finally, I yelled that I needed to cross back. That's when he looked up at me. His voice was casual, like I'd asked him about the weather. He said it wasn't his problem. Something about his tone made me furious. I lost it, started screaming at him, said nasty things. In hindsight, probably not smart. He stopped swinging abruptly, set the axe down, took a few steps closer to the edge. I could see his face more clearly then. His eyes were sunken, the skin around them dark, almost bruised looking. He leaned over the edge. He told me something I'll never forget. He said he knew these woods a lot better than I did. Not threatening exactly, just certain. Like stating a fact I'd be stupid to argue with. We stared at each other. Time stretched out. Then he picked up the axe, turned around, and walked back into the trees. I stood there trying to process it. The tree was still wedged in place, but I could see the splintered edge on his side, cracked deep. I wanted to cross back right then, but there was no way I was trusting my weight to that tree now. I pulled out my phone. 0 service. I decided to cut the hike short. I was mad, sure, but more than that, I was spooked. Something about the encounter felt wrong, in a way I couldn't name. I started walking downstream, figured I'd find another crossing. It would take me back toward where I'd come from anyway. I was wrong. I walked for an hour. The gorge only got deeper. The gap was widening too. Every turn just revealed more impossible terrain. The sun was starting to drop. I began to panic. Getting dark. Miles from my car. Wrong direction. I started seriously considering whether I'd have to climb down into the gorge and back out. Then I found the campsite. It was in a small clearing, fire pit that looked recently used. At first, I felt relieved. Maybe there was another hiker who could help. But the more I looked around, the more wrong. This happened 3 years ago. I'm not going to drag it out. I'll say exactly what happened as it happened. I was hiking through remote forest up north, way off any marked trails. I've always preferred it that way. The actual wilderness. Not the sanitized version you get on popular trails with wooden markers and worn paths. I'd been out there for maybe 4 hours when I noticed I'd lost my bearings. It happens sometimes when you're not following a trail. Usually, I can orient myself pretty quickly. This time was different. Nothing looked familiar. The sun was still high enough that I wasn't in immediate danger, but that sick feeling of being lost was settling into my stomach. I tried to stay calm, kept walking, Told myself I'd spot something recognizable soon. Instead, I started hearing rustling behind me. The rustling wasn't constant, just every 30 seconds or so, like something was matching my pace. I'd stop, and it would stop. I'd start walking, and there it was again. I kept telling myself it was probably a deer, but I'd hiked enough to know deer don't follow people like that. Then all at once, the rustling turned into movement all around me. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. I was surrounded by wolves, 6 or 7 of them, some snarling, some just staring, but it was clear I was a meal. I had my knife out, even though I knew the odds were stacked against me. I remember thinking this was it. This was actually how I was going to die, alone in the woods because I was too stubborn to stick to marked trails. I was trying to decide if I should make myself big or stay still when every single wolf suddenly went rigid. Not like they were reacting to each other, all reacting to something else. Their ears shot up. They all looked in the same direction, somewhere over my shoulder. Then they scattered. Full sprint in the opposite direction from where they'd been looking, almost like they were the ones being hunted. That's when the real fear started. Until that point, it had just been adrenaline, life and death scenario. But once I was alone again, I started getting the creeps. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Complete silence. No wind, no birds, no critters, nothing. Like someone had flipped a switch. It was still light out, but things felt dimmer. Sort of how your vision fades when you're about to pass out. But the worst part was thinking about why the wolves had run. They'd been scared of something. That much was obvious. But whatever could scare off an entire pack of wolves from a distance, I couldn't imagine. I needed to keep moving. I felt really unsettled even in the daylight. I wanted to follow the wolves, but I was pretty certain I'd been walking in the right direction to begin with. So I was at a crossroads. Follow the wolves and potentially get encircled again and get even more lost, or continue in the right direction and possibly encounter whatever had scared them off. I decided to keep walking in the direction I thought would take me out, which meant walking toward whatever the wolves had been freaked out by. My logic was I could waste an hour walking the wrong way only to turn around in the dark, or bite my tongue and walk toward it while I still had daylight. Maybe 20 minutes later, I saw what looked like a clearing up ahead. For a second, I thought it might be a campsite. I could see what looked like a fire ring. But as I got closer, I realized it was wrong. All wrong. There were symbols carved into the trees surrounding the clearing, not initials or trail markers. Intentional deep cuts forming patterns I didn't recognize. Things were hanging from the branches. On leather cords, some looked like bones, small ones, maybe from birds or rodents. Others were metal, rusted and twisted into shapes that hurt to look at. The fire pit in the center wasn't just a ring of stones. The stones were stacked on top of one another, like structures. There was weird stuff in the pit too, pieces of cloth, what looked like jewelry. Other objects I couldn't identify. But here's what made me really freak out. The smoke. There was thick black smoke hanging in the air about 6 feet from the ground. It wasn't moving or dissipating. And it didn't look like it was coming from the fire pit either. It was just there. The fire pit didn't even look like it had been used recently. I stood at the edge of that clearing, frozen. I couldn't look away from that smoke. My eyes kept tracking back to it even when I tried focusing on something else. I have trouble describing the feeling, but it felt like I was looking through a window at something instead of actually being there. Like standing at my kitchen window looking out into the backyard instead of actually being in the backyard. I don't know what that means, but that's what it felt like. There was this feeling building in my chest, like grief and terror mixed together, but for something that hadn't happened yet, almost like my body was mourning something in advance. I've never felt anything like it before or since. I must have stood there for 5 minutes just staring at that smoke. The smoke didn't dissipate, it just stayed there. Something in my brain finally kicked back online. I turned around and ran. I didn't walk or jog, I literally ran. I was overwhelmed with fear. I didn't know what I was running from, but there was this feeling in my gut that told me I needed to get out. My memory gets foggy after that. I think it's because of how scared I was. So scared my instincts took over. But part of me thinks the reason my memory faded was somehow connected to whatever was in the woods. The smoke, or the thing that caused the smoke, or something else entirely. The next thing I remember is it being dark out, meaning I must have been in those woods for another hour or so. I was drenched in sweat and freezing cold, but I was nearly out. Approaching my car, I got in and drove off without another thought. I never reported what I found. What would I even say? I couldn't find that clearing again if I tried, and that's even if I remembered things clearly, which I didn't. This will forever be one of those experiences that just doesn't have an explanation. When I told my dad about what happened, he just said everyone has that one experience sooner or later. Well, this is mine. The thing I still think about from time to time is not how those wolves behaved, not how that campsite looked, not even that impossible smoke that hung in the air. It's the memory loss. From all the research I've done, scary moments get remembered better, not worse. So I have no choice but to think everything that happened that day was connected. When I was younger, me and my friends loved to go camping. Once we got our licenses at 16, we were out almost every weekend. New spots, new trails. Our parents didn't really care as long as we could protect ourselves. For this reason, my dad let us borrow one of his guns. Small handgun, just in case. This happened when we were 18, seniors in high school. In February, me and my girlfriend Megan, my friend Colin, and his girlfriend Anne decided to drive south and backpack through some mountains to see natural waterfalls. 9-hour drive. We left early and made it there around 7 in the evening. Set up camp at one of the official sites for the night, since it was late and we were tired. Megan and I shared a tent. Colin and Anne shared another. I had the gun in my tent. Nothing happened the first night. Next morning, we woke up and made breakfast, drove to the start of the trail. We were going to hike to a waterfall and then find a place to set up camp. On the hike to the waterfall, Anne kept saying she saw someone standing still and staring at her, but he'd been following and she hadn't seen him move. We stopped to look. We saw a man quickly run away. Colin yelled at him to leave or we'd kick his ass, mostly for show to impress his girlfriend, but we were capable of defending ourselves if needed. We continued the hike. Didn't see him again. We eventually made it to the waterfall, had lunch there, took pictures. After about 2 hours, we decided to go find a place to camp before it got dark. While we were looking for a spot, I noticed a woman staring at us. She was freakishly tall and skinny, had to be at least 6'5". It genuinely freaked me out. I pointed her out. Everyone else got unsettled too. We yelled at her to leave us alone. Told her we had a gun. She turned around and walked away. We decided to hike further since we were all creeped out. We had no idea if the two weirdos were connected somehow. After another hour, we found a nice spot next to a small creek with a relatively deep pool of water. We decided to get in and relax. While we were in the water, we talked about the earlier incidents, joked that they were probably locals on drugs. When the sun started to set, we got out and made dinner. We brought chicken to grill, rice and vegetables to boil, and potatoes. We always ate well on our camping trips. While I was cooking, Colin set up his tent and helped me with mine. We ate and then cracked open some of the alcohol we brought. I was and still am a pretty heavy smoker, so I brought some weed and papers. We wanted to have a good time since we put a lot of money into this trip. We told stories and laughed, got pretty intoxicated. Colin fell out of his chair at one point and just laid on the ground laughing. We did this late into the night, eventually went to our tents. Megan and I were messing around in our tent when we suddenly heard someone laughing outside. At first I thought it was Colin laughing at us for some reason. I yelled asking what was so funny. Colin yelled back that it wasn't him. That sank my soul, immediately sobered me up. I grabbed the gun, rushed out of the tent, fired a few shots into the air, yelled for whoever it was to leave us alone or I'd shoot them. That seemed to do the trick. I heard footsteps running away. We moved our tents closer together, decided to have one person stay up at a time as lookout. The next day we debated going home early, but ultimately decided against it. We were sure we'd scared off whoever it was, so we planned to hike somewhere closer to the exit and camp for one final night. After breakfast, we packed up and started the hike back. During the hike, we ran into some other hikers, told them what had happened. They were freaked out too. We chatted for a bit, then continued on. When we stopped for lunch, I realized those were the only other people we'd seen, despite there being a ton of cars in the parking lot earlier. After lunch, we continued down the trail. After about 6 miles, we decided to set up camp. We were around 3 miles from the nearest exit. We pitched our tents, cooked steak and potatoes for dinner, ate, drank, and smoked again before heading to the tents. In the middle of the night, I woke up needing to pee, stepped out of the tent. Out of paranoia, I made sure to bring the gun. While I was peeing, I heard leaves crunching nearby. My heart immediately stopped. I grabbed the gun, finished up, pulled up my pants, turned on my headlamp. The beam revealed the man from the day before, standing in the distance, holding a machete. I could see him clearly this time. Long, dirty black hair, super lanky. I screamed and raised the gun as he started charging at me. I fired off every shot I had. Must have hit him somewhere because I heard him yell and saw him fall. By now Colin, Megan, and Anne were all awake. I told them to pack up. We needed to leave fast. I didn't want to involve the police. I wasn't sure if I could get charged for something, and honestly, his life didn't seem worth it. We didn't bother packing the tents. No time. Grabbed our bags and practically ran the final 3 miles. Made it back to the cars in under an hour. We climbed in, locked the doors, decided to sleep in the car for the night, covered the windows, tried to get some rest. When we woke up in the morning, we left immediately. Stopped for breakfast at a diner in a small town. We never called the cops. I'm still conflicted about whether we should have. This happened years ago. No reports about it ever came out. So, for all I know, those people are still out there. The thing that bothers me most isn't what happened. It's what didn't happen after. No news, no missing person reports, no investigation. Like it never occurred at all. Like the forest just swallowed it up and kept going. Sometimes I wonder if we were the only ones who made it out. If there were others before us who weren't as lucky, who didn't have a gun or didn't react fast enough. The forest doesn't answer questions like that. It just stays quiet, keeps its secrets. And you learn to live with not knowing.